Let's talk about the fear for a moment, because it isn't without merit, right? Because we do see individuals, Jordan Peterson comes to mind, which is where I first was introduced to your work, as someone who he has in his life evaluated that speaking up for him at least is less of a cost than falling silent. And I've sort of loosely followed his fight with his regulatory bodies who have threatened and are trying. I think they are actively, if they not have already, removed his license for his ability to practice in the province of Ontario, Canada, for a couple of tweets that they didn't like that he had made. And they felt that he needed self-remediation and he needed all of these corrective courses and all of that. So I think that he's an extreme example of someone where you look and say, oh, look, there's someone speaking his mind on a variety of topics, irrespective of whether you agree with him or not. But you can even bring it even closer to home. You might put something up on Instagram or Twitter or X or whatever, and the comments that you might garner from expressing your opinion are something to behold. That is not something to loosely disregard. I think humans are generally, we care about what other people think of us. So let's talk a little bit, talk to me a little bit about the fear, maybe even the biology. You talk about this in the book, the biology of conformity, and how that can also drive our behaviors as well.
Yes. And you know what, you're so right, because I think sometimes when these conversations around unraveling censorship, sort of the big scale censorship, but even self-censorship, there's this very simplistic idea of people just need to speak up, full stop, and not actually acknowledging the culture in which we have created, where it's very difficult for people to put forward even non-controversial issues. Because another thing you're very accurate about is that we're in a time where you don't even need to be saying anything controversial anymore. You could be going about your day and just put forward an opinion. You could have, let's say, 100 followers or even 50 followers, but you have a public page, which is also a key component to all of this, something that I'll return to. You could say something that is remotely, so just an opinion, an idea that you have, a curiosity, an answer. Say you don't like something, and then all of a sudden it explodes because it's gone viral in some kind of way, or it's landed, because there is such a thing as context collapse, which is when our thoughts, especially when they're shared online, they're no longer sort of confined to a space in which we remotely control. There was a time where you had your friend group, right? In the early days of social media, you knew who was part of your friends list, probably people you went to school with, colleagues, family members. So you can trust on some level that they will probably echo the same worldview as you. They might not feel the exact same way, but there's probably going to be some sort of similarities in worldviews. Now, if you have a public profile online, there is no such thing anymore. You could write something sitting in the Western world and it lands with someone in the Middle East or lands someone in Africa who lives in a very different context. So the way in which they process what you're saying will be very different,
Right.
So I think that's also something to consider, that there aren't those sort of digital boundaries that used to exist before. Now it's a free for all. But also, I think where the self-censorship thing comes in, and why I prefer bringing it back to the self, there are a lot of people who believe that you're not allowed to ask questions. You're not allowed to get things wrong. You're not allowed to have a certain type of sense of humor. You're not allowed to agree with certain types of people. And because they have imprinted this message on themselves, then we come together as a collective of people that believe that you're not allowed to do X, Y, Z. And then we respond from that place. So I think that's also something that we see where we have, and I truly believe that we all contribute to this culture in some way, where we've created a world in which people are so terrified of saying even non-controversial things. But I don't believe that we need to just accept that this is just how it is. You just don't speak your mind online, or you just don't question anything, or you do that offline, full stop, which I think is important. But I think the danger is in sort of just accepting that this is the norm. Absolutely, the fears do exist, but I think the fears don't just exist in a vacuum. These are all individuals that have a certain way of viewing the world, individuals that carry their own intolerance. So it's how dare you speak your mind when I can't? So that's why I sort of like to bring it back to the self, because I think if enough individuals shift the way in which they are behaving and responding or reacting, having that inability to deal with differing views, then I think something can shift, you know?